helping a person take micro steps to learn how to evolve and expand their energy in slow ways because we have to learn how to sustain it so that we can eventually become a five. And that may not seem like enough for a lot of people, but this process of healing, it is a journey and it's slow and it unfolds like the most beautiful flower in the world. And then we become a 5, and then maybe we become a 5.2, and then maybe a 5.4. And when we can sustain that 5.5 for a period of time, then we start noticing, oh, my world actually looks like a 5.5. I'm attracting different types of people. I'm attracting different job opportunities. I feel differently in my relationships. So it's a beautiful unfolding if we allow it, but we have to become conscious enough, brave enough to admit to ourselves and often to other people, this isn't about you, this is about me.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Ask Julie Ryan Show. It's where we blend spirituality and practicality to help you live a life of purpose and joy. We have Leah Guy with us on the show today. Leah is a spiritual teacher, author, and intuitive healer who combines her personal triumphs over abuse, addiction, and eating disorders, along with more than 20 years in private practice to help people transform their lives. I'm interested in learning what golden nuggets of advice Leah has for all of us, whether we have or are currently experiencing trauma or are supporting a loved one who is. Please remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this episode with your family and friends. Now let's go talk with Leah. Leah, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you join us today.
Thank you, Julie. It's a pleasure to be here.
You refer to yourself as a modern sage. What do you mean by that?
Well, a lot of people, I think, are on this awakening loop of consciousness and kind of rising up. And I feel like for the majority of my life, I've been what I always say, like, riding the crest of the wave in a sense, and so I feel connected to a wisdom and an intuition and, knowingness, but I'm also very modern, down to earth, and so I blend the 2 together, living a modern, practical, normal life as well as, being in the space of intuition and wisdom and helping others.
What's your definition of an old-fashioned sage?
An old-fashioned sage.
Yes, so a sage is from the beginning of time and long ago.
Yeah. When I think of an old-fashioned sage, I would think of perhaps more ritual and more slowness than what someone like myself might have in their life. Definitely. Well, I think there's a different but similar connection to the land and to their innate qualities and using those every day.
I agree. I think of Merlin the magician,
Mm.
with all of his skill sets. He could heal people, he was an astrologer, a lot of people believe that he's a mythical figure. I don't. I think he was real. I think that that whole Arthurian legend thing is based on real things that happened, and then it became a legend over time. And I also, right after that, I think of female sages throughout the millennia of wise women and women who were the healers and the reading the tea leaves and using the pendulums and all of that in all of the different cultures. Does any of that come to mind with you as
Oh,
well?
yes. I think of the Aborigines in Australia.
Yeah, good point.
And I have a lot of connection to the Native Americans and their healing methods and so forth. So, yeah, I think that there's a beautiful just from the beginning of time, we have these beautiful examples of sages and wise people, that have used their skills in different ways.
What in particular about the Aboriginal people resonates with you?
I just think that there is a real natural and profound finding or resonating with one's abilities without pushing or too much, perhaps even education, just like knowing, oh, I'm the person that wants to harvest the flowers and make remedies for them. Oh, I'm the person that will give birth to children. Oh, I'm the person who will, lead us in the pack. There's just I've always had this idea or this sense that there was just more of a knowingness of their assignment in a way,
Mhm.
and acceptance of that.
I use them a lot to refer to telepathic communication because they can communicate with their fellow tribes people or whatever you wanna call them, fellow Aboriginal people across vast distances. There are many, many stories throughout the millennia of that. They'll be 1,000 miles away from one of their family members or a friend, and they'll be able to communicate with them. And there's research that shows how that's a real thing. It's not
Yeah.
just a legend. And I
I
think
feel like
there
I do that. Do you do that?
I do. Yeah, we communicate with people, and for me, it's communicating with their spirit. It doesn't matter whether their spirit's attached to a body or whether their spirit's in heaven. That's what I call non-physical, is heaven. It doesn't matter. It's just energy connecting with energy. Do you find the same thing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. But also with people who are living, I feel very communicative with people thousands of miles away or people I don't speak to normally. I think it's for a lot of people, the not knowing if the message is received, when we're not in actual communication and we have to trust that and still communicate. There's so much that we're capable of that I try to practice regularly.
Well, and everybody's experienced a situation where you think of somebody and then they call you or they email you or they send you a text or you run into them somewhere and you think, oh, what a coincidence. Well, there's no coincidence involved. There are no coincidences in life. I believe that you're communicating telepathically, and that's the intuitive abilities that are coming to the surface. How'd you get into this work? Were you raised in a spiritual family? What did you just grow up being able to communicate with spirits? What's the story on that?
Yeah, no, I wasn't raised in a spiritual family. I mean, my grandmothers were very religious, church-going women, and I found my love for God and spirit and angels at a what I would say a pretty young age. And then when I was in middle school, high school, I had a real profound experience of that love connection. But even when I was younger, I would see things and hear things. And of course, I didn't question it so much, but I didn't really understand what it was. And then it wasn't probably until my 20s, early 20s, I went to a school where we intentionally learned how to channel and meditate and read energy and so forth. And kind of put the pieces together for myself. Even then, though, I wouldn't say that I was using it in my work, but I wasn't using it exclusively in my work. I didn't come out of the gate and say, I'm a psychic medium or I'm a medium or anything like that. But I definitely used my skills of intuition and seeing and hearing as I was working with clients on a physical level. I did massage therapy and sports injury and different kinds of body work and energy work. And so I was able to help them in ways that just were utilizing the information I was sensing. So I let it kind of be a gradual unfolding with my work.
Where did you go to school and what was the catalyst for you to go to that school?
The school was actually in California. It was the School of Enlightenment and Healing, and it's not there any longer. Um, the catalyst was for my own healing. I had gone through a series of traumas and just kind of swept them under the rug. And finally, I was brought to my knees. And a friend of mine who I'd known in California uh, saw me struggling, and I was doing the traditional therapies or the Western therapies. And they were helping somewhat, but not that it wasn't getting me over the hump. And so she had information about the school and she said, I think this might be interesting for you. And so then I went and it truly was the catalyst that helped me heal and also brought me, right in front of what I wanted to do for my living. And so it just led to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing. But yeah, it was for my own survival.
Isn't that fascinating how we're led and when we're in the middle of something that could even be perceived as horrific by us and by others hearing about it. And we look back on it and we think, yeah, that really was awful. And at the same time, it led me to this and this, which has made my life so much better in so many ways. Would you be willing to share a little bit about what happened and what was that led you to figure out a way to heal yourself?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I talk about it, and I just wrote a one woman show and did an audiobook and working on a screenplay right now. There were a few, little T traumas when I was younger that, like a lot of people have. But one year when I was 11, my parents divorced, and that same year, my aunt was murdered. And it was a lot. It was a lot, in every part, in every nook of my being. It was a lot.
As a child, when we have a trauma like the sudden loss of someone, whether it's due to a medical thing or a murder like your aunt, I'm so sorry. We don't have any way to process that, and the adults don't know what to tell us either because 'cause they're in their own grief and they haven't been trained on how to help children. Where did you find somebody that was able to help you with that, or did you have to wait until you were in your 20s to go explore the spiritual side of the equation?
Yeah, I waited, and that's what this was the beginning of kind of a really deep process of my understanding of grief and so forth, but I didn't have a way out. And then actually, when I was early 20s in Birmingham, I went through a sexual assault. And it
Oh,
was at
jeez.
that point where I found my way to this school because it was like this domino effect, going on. I couldn't process one thing and then the next and go back, and it was too much.
So, it sounds like you had your aunt get murdered, and then when you were sexually assaulted, I'm so sorry about that too, my goodness, girl. That just piled on so much that you knew there was no discussing with yourself that, "Okay, I can handle this alone." You knew that you needed to get some professional help is what it sounds like.
Yes. Yeah, so I went to the therapy, I took the antidepressants, I, did whatever I could, learned how to do yoga and all the things, but I just had a sense within me that not only did I need a different kind of help, but I needed to find myself again, really learn how to access my own spirit and yeah, and heal. And it was at that school that I think a lot of my gifts as far as the intuition and channeling were confirmed, and I got to practice a lot. And it was a beautiful experience overall. And like I said, it just kind of led to the next thing, which led to the next thing, and 30 years later, here we are.
Right. Similar with me, I didn't go through the drama and trauma that you went through, but 30 years ago, I was led to study this stuff, this what I call woo woo stuff. And the woo in the Taoist tradition means source. So, I love using the word woo-woo because it's source, and that's what it's all about. We have spirit work through us and with us to help facilitate healing with others, whether that be talking with a deceased loved one or doing a medical thing or whatever, talking to their pets. Doing I know you have a buffet of psychicness too, that's what I call my skill set, I know you do too. Tell us a little bit about what all you do with clients as far as to help them heal.
Yeah, well, it's not primarily. I in that evolution, I think was helping people at a physical level understand what was going on inside of them, what needed attention. I wouldn't call myself a medical medium, but I was when I laid my hands on them, I was able to access and see and help a good amount of people that way.
What did it look like to you when you were working with somebody?
What did it look like? How I was
Like you
seeing?
said you'd put your hand on somebody and then you'd be able to see, what were you seeing?
Mostly where there was any energetic blockages or malfunctions or clots or the precipice of a heart attack or stomach issues, a large variety of things. And I loved that work. I really do love that work. I don't feel like that's my primary work now, but it was just part of the evolution. Now, I tend to in one-on-one work with people, if they're not coming to me for just a reading, I work with them doing soul retrieval work, and it's accessing different parts of them through their timeline, parts of them that were overwhelmed, stressed, traumatized, shut down in some way. And so I enter their timeline and find specific events or dates or ages or scenarios of their life and bring that to them. And then we work to retrieve the part of them connected to that time so that they can have, healing and the sense of wholeness and reintegration of themselves. So I do that work, and I also do stray readings. People come looking for, they wanna move or they relationship issues or what's gonna happen or communicate with people on the other side. So,
Back to the soul retrieval
yes.
part, when you're looking at somebody's timeline, is it all their lifetimes, just this lifetime? Is it an amalgamation of both? How does that work?
Most of the time, I'm just looking at this lifetime because it's kind of right here, right now stuff that needs to get cleared or resolved or reintegrated. And I'm of the belief that, right here, right now stuff is just a mere reflection of other lifetimes. Sometimes it does show up as a story or timeline from the past. And I think when that happens, it's just, I don't know, maybe we're too stubborn to really own or recognize this moment and our participation in it or things that have happened. And so it's easier to access a different timeline or a different part of ourselves. But in the soul retrieval, it's primarily from the womb to now and specific events in their own life.
So when you identify something that's happened, whether the person remembers it or not, or they may be able to go back and reach in their memory and say, "Oh gosh, I haven't thought about that in decades," kind of a thing. I would imagine that happens too. What do you do with that information once you retrieve it?
Well, I do kind of I guess you'd call it like a ceremony in a sense. And so um, we capture the age of that soul or that being at that time and kind of like it kind of mimics inner child work a little bit in the sense of witnessing the self at that particular time of their life. And then we do this kind of ceremony to bring that part back to them and integrate it back into one's physical and energetic biofield now. So it's subtle but very profound work. Some people feel it immediately, and some people are like, a couple weeks later, they may say, "Wow, I'm having memories that I haven't thought about in a long time," or "I'm feeling more artistic," or "I'm feeling this," or "I'm feeling that," whatever the aspect of them was at the time. And then because the integration period can take a little bit of time, and then we just bring the parts home. It's like a homecoming ceremony in a sense, and it's really, really beautiful and powerful.
Where does the part go that you're
Um,
retrieving?
yeah.
Where do you retrieve it? I'm not familiar with this, so I'm fascinated. That's why
Oh,
I'm yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
It feels like a dimension. It literally feels like a dimension sandwiched between here and the dimension that I work with in mediumship. So I don't know if that dimension actually exists, but that's where I go. It's like this particular level almost. And so I'm assuming I don't read Akashic records, but I'm assuming there would be a similar dimension as what they access. Because there is all the timeline, that I can see and have information to. So it's kind of there. It feels like it's in the ether. Um I don't know how to describe it beyond that, really.
Is it similar to when somebody is abused, especially as a child? This is very common from what I've read, and I am not a therapist and I'm not a psychologist. So I am not a licensed professional trained in this. But from what I've read over the years, there are many instances where perhaps a child is abused either physically or sexually and they don't remember it. So they put it in their subconscious and then it's retrieved and it helps them heal the trauma that's running their life that they're unaware of. Is it a similar thing like that, but just on a spiritual level?
Yes, very similar. So they might call it splitting or dissociation.
Yeah, I've heard those terms.
Yeah, so it's very similar, and in fact, I would say if the work I was doing and the work a therapist were doing, if we access the same part, it would be a very similar, result, but, yes, my work is more focused on the spiritual, the heart, the compassion, the healing, the reparenting of this,
Mhm.
part of self. Yeah.
Well, and I think the big takeaway in this conversation so far about this soul retrieval thing, and see if you agree, Leah, is that people really can heal from this and heal on an energetic level, and that it integrates into the physical level, into their body and into their lives as humans. Am I understanding that
Oh,
correctly?
yes, totally, 100%, yeah. In fact, I think most of our issues and problems are because we don't know how to do this or we're resistant to doing it at a deep level. So, not that this would solve everything, but there's a lot of information there for sure.
Well, and the fact that you've experienced this trauma yourself and been able to heal yourself and live a life of joy and purpose, it seems to me that you're the perfect person to go to have help someone when they are having situations. What percentage of your clients, and if you don't have a number, it doesn't matter, but do you find that there are a good number of your clients that are led to you and they're not even sure why, and they're not even sure that something has happened to them, and then you're able to pull something in that then they can remember and heal?
Um, I will say I feel like all of them are led to me for a reason they either consciously know or subconsciously know. They all mirror parts of me and I mirror parts of them.
Mhm.
And I've never advertised, I've never in any way for my work, so I trust that 100%.
Mhm.
Not everyone who comes to me do I do this process with, and the people I do, they may not have come just for that. Some do, some come just for that. But a lot of people, we start working, and then it comes to a point, and I'm led to guide them here, so
That's what I'm hearing in a divine download, that a lot of your clients aren't even aware of this stuff, and then when they start working with you, it comes to the surface, and God, what a service, girl. That's fantastic. Let's change directions for a minute. You call yourself a healing artist, and I've seen your paintings and they're fabulous. Tell us about that. What all does that entail?
It's interesting. I'm glad that you said this because I don't call myself a healing artist because I paint. I call myself a healing artist because I feel like in the totality of what I do, I'm not comfortable calling myself a healer, a medium, this or that or whatever. To me, it's all artistic expression. It's saying yes and being part of the genesis of or the optimization or whatever of what's next. And so sometimes that comes out in music, sometimes it comes out in speaking, sometimes it comes out in readings or paint or on the stage or in a video. I don't know. Um, but that's what I do. So I feel more like, um, yeah, I just feel like a healing artist.
So, your art that you have published, how does that play into the equation of helping people heal? Or is it just something that's an expression of your own personal healing?
I think art is an expression for all of us of healing, and I put it up mostly just to inspire people because I'm not the best artist in the world. It's part of a process, it's expression, it's color, it's texture, it's how the mind is working, it's all that kind of thing. So that's why I included it. I do sometimes sell or show and shows and that kind of thing, but that's not my focus really at all. Not right now, but I love to create. And I feel like when we're in the energy of creating and producing, then that's all I do is create and produce, and help a person to make changes and shifts in themselves so that they can create and produce, make change, be solvent, be fluid, be in the flow. And when we're in that state, we're not dragged down by the human body density and the woundedness and the memory of the past and the connection to, all these painful points and so forth. We're in a completely different energetic state. So that's kind of I want my work, and I want my work, and I don't want to say all of our works because everyone has a different emphasis, but I want my work to reflect that it's not about me doing something for you, me being this and you being that, and this is our relationship. It's this symbiotic kind of beautiful, magical expression of life, and it comes out in every which way. For me, it just happens to come out sometimes in painting or
I've seen your paintings grow. You're very good.
oh,
That
thank
one you
you.
have on your website, what is it, a hummingbird or some other kind of bird?
Mm-hmm.
It's
Hummingbird.
fabulous.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, and you bring up a good point, which is two really good points. Number one, spirit doesn't communicate on the I feel crappy channels because the vibration's too low. So it's like we're listening to country music, whining about mama, the truck, and the dog. That station when we're feeling badly. And then spirits on on the classical music station. And so we got to change the channel to get that inspiration from spirit. And I agree with you when people are feeling down or blue or whatever, it's hard to get inspired because they just feel bad and spirit can't inspire them. And that's where most of our inspiration, if not all of it, comes from. The other thing that I think is interesting is we all have talents in things that surprise us. And it's a matter of when we're led to try something, we have a thought about me painting. You tell me about painting and I'm gonna say, I can't paint. I don't do anything that's painting involved. And so I'm not apt to buy the supplies to even try because I've already said to myself, "Hey, that's not my thing. I can't paint." Whereas that's a red flag to me to say, well, if you get inspired to paint, go buy the stuff, even if it's in the dollar store and it's a watercolor paint set, go get it and see what happens with that. And I think that applies to all the things that we're led to do in our lives. And we've got to take action. It's not a matter of that it's going to manifest whatever it is we want. If we just think about it a lot, we've got to take action. We've got to move in that direction. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yes. I mean, I believe most people are living in survival mode and they feel stuck. And that's a very common thing that we've all heard. I feel as therapists, healers, what have you, is people feel stuck. Well, the antidote to that is, we're not meant to be stagnant. Our energy is not meant to be stagnant. It's being present is not being stagnant. Being monk-like and meditating on a hillside, it's not being stagnant. In fact, it's the opposite. And so most people that need to take action, so forth, this is why with our healing work that it's imperative because when our shame comes up, we don't want to take action. When our fear comes up, we don't want to take action. When our guilt comes up, when our any kind of derogatory self-reflection comes up, when our association with our families that didn't have, or when we think about our past and how we've been hurt or treated or talked to or what have you, all of these things, they're of the body, they're of the world. And in that space, no, it's very difficult to take action because most people are spending their energy trying to remain safe and keeping it all together so that, well, a few things, so that either someone else doesn't um, see how incompetent or unworthy they are, or so that their whole world doesn't crumble and then they actually have to show up and do something differently in their life. All these reasons to stay safe. And when we do our healing work and when we're in spirit and we're connected and aligned to the vibration of who we are as connected to source and spirit, we're safer out there than we are in our little confines of ecosystems that we've created for ourselves out of survival mode. And that's the trick. And that's to me what art is. Art is fluid, it is movement, it is expressive, it is free, it is colorful, it is quiet, it is beautiful and fragrant, and it is what we have all around us. And that's what I want people to learn how to get to. So yeah, it's a whole process.
Mhm. So when somebody comes to you and they want to just explore spirituality with you and explore how they can enhance their life in what other way, do you have certain things that you wanna go through with them from the beginning, or is it just where you're led and it's different with every client?
It is different. I see a lot of people that have these programs, these coaching programs or these different programs, and that's great for them. For me, it would never work. I just have to tune in to where they are and be with them there and commit to being next to them, holding their hand and being a mirror for them. And from that place, I let spirit guide me to what they need and where we're going because I don't know. I have a decent idea most of the time after a first conversation, but it's very, very different for everybody.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Same with me. Same
Yeah.
thing. Same thing.
When I wrote my book, so people ask me, "Why did I write?" Because I don't identify as a writer. Again, that's why I call myself a healing artist. But when I first started writing, the purpose was is although we're also unique and different, and it is gonna be a different journey for everyone, we have so many similarities at the same time. And so I just wanted to write to speak to people or the things that I kept finding myself saying over and over and over and over and over again so that we can see ourselves in each other and in a deeper way for ourselves. Because the language of love, the language of healing, the language of spirit, it's the same. Our stories are different. That's the piece that's different. But I think that, there's so much similarity.
Mhm. Can you share a couple of examples of the things that you found yourself saying over and over again to your different clients?
Oh, sure. Oh gosh. Well, about our energy systems, our chakras and energy, and how energy reflects what's going on in our environment, in our mind, in our bodies, and vice versa. So I did my first book was about that essentially, and to understand when we're having physical symptoms, emotional symptoms, what's going on in our energetic system, and help us see ourselves and where our core wounds are likely located and so forth. So that would be a thing. Boundaries. Ugh, everybody, we all need help with creating boundaries, healthy boundaries.
Say
And,
more about that.
yeah, well, so I get frustrated in this world of healing because there's so many people now on the bandwagon, that are teaching or talking, or even if they have zero credentials or training or what have you, and that's okay. But there's these ideas out there like, you gotta let go, and, we're talking about boundaries, and we're talking about, "He crossed my boundary, and I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z because of that," and there's this defensiveness that goes on. Narcissism and other things, it's like, it's very easy to point to all these people who have things wrong with them and not look at ourselves and what's wrong with us and the role that we're playing. So boundaries are a great example of that. When we create healthy boundaries, it has nothing to do with anyone else. Nothing. I'm not putting up a boundary because my dad calls me too many times a day. I'm putting up a boundary because this is the way that I need to function in a healthy, safe, sane way to feel balanced, to feel like I'm, taking care of myself, to get accomplished and obligated. And this other time is when I'm able to have personal calls or family calls or what have you. It has nothing to do with somebody else. And that language that goes on, um, and I guess it's in particular with the younger generations, but, mm, even in the older generations of things like boundaries. So I really try to teach about that a lot to help a person understand what they can really do to be healthier and not be defensive and not to be retaliating against someone or, uh, it's tricky.
That's a big statement that boundaries are just about us and they're not about anybody else. I don't know that I have heard anybody say that as succinctly as you just did. And it brings to mind times in my life where there was somebody who I would call an energy suck. And they were just it was just total drama and trauma one after another to the point where it was exhausting to talk to them or to be around them because it was so negative. This was in my 20s. And I remember thinking, okay, I just have to avoid this person because it feels so bad and I love them and I wish them the best. But oh my gosh, I'm just exhausted every time I interact with them. What would be something that you would recommend for people that are going through a similar situation? Now it's 65. I'm like, great. It's been great talking to you. I hope you have a wonderful day. And I just don't encourage the relationship because it's too exhausting. But and really, at this point in my life, people don't come around me like that, I think, because I live in a high vibe most of the time. But how would you counsel my 24-year-old self back in the day?
Well, was this a family relationship? Is
No,
that what
it
you're
was a
saying?
friend.
A friend, yeah. I think that again, when we take the focus off of them and put it onto us, and I know there are plenty of people with lower vibration frequencies, the complainers, blamers, all that kind of stuff. But with a friend, for example, we would ask, well, what are you getting out of this relationship? Why are you maintaining this friendship if they're draining you? There's probably a pattern going on within self of I need to feel this way, or I need to be victim to this, or some kind of
Or
subconscious pattern.
rescue.
Yes, exactly, or something. Or the simply as, this energy drain somehow serves me, we're used to being exhausted, we're used to having excuses for not feeling good or right or what have you. A lot of that can come from us not feeling empowered enough to, love ourselves in the choices and to create healthy boundaries and to that we are good enough to attract people that are actually going to nurture us, and so we settle for people who are going to drain us. But most of the time, it has to do with our own worth or our own limitations about stuff, And it's hard for people when they're primary relationships or family relationships for sure. Um, but it's a lot less difficult when the focus is on you and not them. So if you're focused on the other person and they're challenging or difficult, and we're somehow taking that personally, and we don't like that, now we're trying to adjust ourselves to them. When the focus is on self and caring for self in a boundaried way, and they may say or do something that is what we don't like, if we're not taking it personally, we're not taking it into our field, that it's meaningless. It has no energetic effect whatsoever. And so, I had a healing center for several years up near New York City and a storefront, with all the crystals and things that people love and all that. And it was actually the number one question I had with people walk into that store of like, how do I deal with toxic people? How do I deal with energy vampires? How do I deal with these people? The number one question. And my answer to them always was, you're not going to deal with them, deal with yourself. Don't give them your energy or attention in the way that you are. They cannot do to you what you don't let them do to you.
And so when let's say my 24-year-old self recognizes that, then what's the next step?
Well, depending on your level of comfort, I mean, you can certainly speak your truth in a kind way to the person if you want to try to resolve, repair, or exit the relationship. Um, but the well, I maybe is your question like, what do you do after you set healthy boundaries or not take energetically from that person?
What do I do to set a healthy boundary at that back at that stage? And if it's something that I don't want to have continue, when I realize that it's about me, does it negate what I was feeling before if I still feel that it's a toxic? I'm using, air quotes for those of you that are listening, a toxic relationship, then what? What's the next step? Okay, I've identified that it's something for me to work on.
Mhm.
How do I set that healthy boundary with that other person?
Yeah. This is actually the 3 steps in my last book, Overcoming Toxic Emotions is the name of
Okay,
the book. And
great.
so as you just you acknowledge it first, and second, accept the piece of your own whatever it is, however difficult, ugly, uncomfortable, revealing it is about ourselves. And then we do have to take some kind of action. Now that doesn't have to be a strong action, like I said, such as terminating the relationship. And at 24 years old, this is really challenging because most people at 24 don't have the emotional maturity. But at 52, I would. And here's what I would do at 52. I would call or text or whatever, initiate the conversation with my friend and say something like this. I'm noticing when we're together, I get triggered or I start feeling uncomfortable. I think I have some work to do within myself because I either personalize what you're saying or I'm taking it personal or it's something's irritating me. And I wanted to bring this to you because I value you and I care about you, but I'm not sure we're either not a good match right now for one another, or maybe we're the perfect match to help each other see ourselves and really kind of unearth it, dig it up. But we can't dig it up and be blaming the other person. When we have these kinds of conversations, it has to come with that high level of awareness of, here's what I see in me. Here's the pattern that keeps showing up for me. And I really want to be your friend, but honestly, I'm not sure if I can right now because I keep getting triggered or I keep getting irritated. Or when we, are together, I feel activated somehow. And now you're owning it. And now you're being honest with yourself and with them without blaming them, and you're setting the stage for something needs to change here. Because we know, I mean, we all know this, but it's hard. We cannot make or change or do make a person do anything differently. It is such you talk about a waste of energy. That is the biggest waste of energy I think all of us have. We have this idea, I want my neighbor to be nicer or not wake up at 5 a.m. or what have you. We spend all this energy wanting something that's not real. And this is the work of us getting really aligned and being present in our bodies and our lives and connected to source and spirit of just being in acknowledgement, acceptance of what is real. And when we're in doing that, as I often say, there's usually nothing wrong. The problems really become very small and very few if we can just get into the reality of what is real here now and not be thinking what we want, how it could be, how it should be, what it was, who I was, where all the things, just this. So that's what I would suggest. But it's it takes a lot of confidence in oneself to broach an uncomfortable conversation with someone that we have a personal relationship with.
Well, that was beautifully said. The
Mm,
the make-believe conversation with
mm.
this other person. I think the kids today would call that ghosting, if you didn't have that conversation, if you just blocked them on your phone or did something like that, and I think that's more common than not. And
Probably, yeah.
and I would imagine that the issues persist perhaps with somebody else, but it's a pattern that repeats when somebody just ghosts them. I don't know what's another term for that. Somebody just disengages without any kind of explanation. And that is not the kind thing to do, even if it's somebody who's been abusive. It's in that situation, I would think that there would be a different methodology perhaps that would be instigated and employed. Can you speak to that for
Well,
those
yeah,
who are listening and watching that are in a perhaps an abusive situation to set boundaries?
yes, that is a different, scenario altogether, and, whether we term it taking responsibility for self fully, it asks us to have such loving, gentle, gracious, compassionate care for self that it's uncomfortable for most people, and sometimes that does look like a quick termination, really putting our foot down, blocking the number, exiting a situation, for sure if we're being harmed. And a lot of people, I don't know that they're aware when they're being emotionally or mentally harmed. I have several clients that are, and I've been in these myself, but that find themselves in relationships where they're manipulated and lied to and verbally or emotionally abused in different ways. And it's really hard to get out of those because we're in our activated patterns of living from our core wound. And that can either look like codependency or overgiving or being a people pleaser, a doormat, negating our own worth. And again, this is why we do our healing work. We can't we can't just look at, as I mentioned before, the narcissist. If someone's in an abusive relationship with a narcissist, it's very, very easy to go online and just find all the zillions of things wrong with the narcissist and how they might behave and the problems they cause.
Please explain what a narcissist is for people who don't know. That's a word that's thrown around a lot, but what's
It
your
is.
definition of a narcissist?
I don't know that I have an actual definition, but it's a person who has a grandiose sense of self and usually feeds on other people to experience the who I am, to experience their worth, for example. So it becomes all about them. Um, there's a lot of more subtle narcissists, and one might say, well, they're not flamboyant, they're not, grandiose, they're not seeking attention everywhere. But in interpersonal relationships, this is set up where they start manipulating, controlling, and so forth to get what they want, to get the attention, to feed off of the person that they're with. And there's a lot of information out there about the narcissist. As you said, it's thrown around a lot. If I'm with a narcissist and I spend all of my time trying to understand the narcissist, who's going to heal here? Now, there's nothing wrong with understanding it because we do have to have the acknowledgement of, okay, what's going on, especially if we're in a situation where we've been manipulated or gaslit or what have you. But once I understand, oh, I'm the codependent feeding the narcissist because I have these issues. Now I have the opportunity to heal.
And what's a codependent for those that don't know?
A codependent is a person who functions in the realm of if you're okay, I'm okay. In other words, everything I do is pretty much to assure that people around me are happy or satisfied. And if they are, then I feel safe enough to be happy or satisfied for myself. Now, the irony is that the codependent and narcissist, their core wounding is usually not that much different from one another. They have a wounding of self in some way. They don't see themselves or their worth, or they were ignored, or they were, overly punished or neglected, or what have you. So these are like opposite expressions of a similar wound. And when I wrote my last book, Overcoming Toxic Emotions, the whole intro is about how not to blame other people. And this is why, because just like in that example, if I'm just understanding the narcissist and then I exit that relationship because I say no, thank you, which we have to do sometimes, or hopefully we will, once we learn that this is not healthy. But then if I turn over here and start another relationship, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to attract another narcissist or another toxic relationship somehow, partner, because I'm the common denominator. And so we have to own our stuff. We have to. And it doesn't always mean that you're a codependent, but I'm saying if we don't look at the role that we play in any kind of relationship and why we stay, why we interact, how we interact, where we fall short, where we need support, then we're just feeding the problem. So it's really important. I don't know what your original question was now.
Well, no, no, no. This is all really valuable stuff. I met somebody recently who is a guy who's been married 5 times
Mhm,
to addicts.
mhm.
And he's a psychologist, and he's been married to primarily alcoholics, and I'm thinking, "Really? Didn't you study this stuff in school? Why do you keep marrying these alcoholics and then they betray you and all of that?" And I figured, and I don't have any training in this, as I mentioned earlier, like you do, but I figured, Well, you got some stuff to check out, buddy, about yourself and why you keep being led to these women and marrying them. I guess trying to fix them. I don't know.
Well, there's a
But
variety of reasons, I think. It's easy to look and go, "Oh, we're trying to fix our mommy wounds or our daddy wounds," or somehow, but we don't. People don't just come out and go, "Oh, I want to fix other people." There's a motivation behind that, and the motivation is one of two things, or usually it's both things, is that we're trying to correct and find our own value and worth. And the only way we've known how to do that is set up a system of if I'm valuable by helping or changing or alleviating or correcting or somehow for someone else, they'll stay with me because otherwise I don't feel my value. So that's a common example. But if we secondarily look at all of this just energetically, and this is why I love energy and energy work, not Reiki and so forth, but really having the perspective of how energetics work. Uh, and also in that last book, talking about our core wounds, the vibration, the frequency that goes with those core wounds. And then we operate from that state the majority of our lives until we become conscious enough to make different choices for ourselves, but that's a low percentage of people. And so we're attracting if I'm operating at a low frequency, and I'm not saying that in a judgmental way, I'm saying that in a, a practical way that's based out of fear or guilt, I'm going to attract people of that frequency. They may not be based out of fear or guilt. Probably it'll be similar, but they may have other attributes like, um, addictions or, behavioral issues or so forth, because I'm going to have those things because I'm operating from that place. And so it's never a surprise to me and myself as well, I'm not perfect by any regard, and I've had to do a tremendous amount of work to get out of my patterns that, that people like this psychologist, repeat. We repeat because we stay on the same frequency. And as long as we're on that frequency, it's gonna all smell the same. It may look different, but it's gonna smell the same. And we're usually the only ones that are doing the smelling, and that's where people go, "Oh my gosh, so and so is just like so and so," or I feel the same way I felt when I was, 15 years old or whatever. It comes up if we're aware. It's fascinating.
and so, yeah, this is I love how you're combining the 2. So with the energy side of the equation, it helps them recognize, change their frequency so that they're in a different place, a different mindset, and a different frequency, and they're attracting events and people and situations that are of a higher frequency that are gonna be way more enjoyable. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes. So I think of it like we have different fields around us. We have our physical cells and we have our immediate energy field and we have the larger auric field, biofield. And so in this regard, when we're talking about the frequency, I'm referring to an emotional frequency. Like in my book, I referenced it very simply from 0 to 10. Now, that's not the actual frequencies that exist, but just for people to understand. And so, as I give an example in the book, although I came from a very normal, relatively just great family, right? There was a big piece of me that felt alone. I felt alone in my spirituality. I felt alone emotionally. Certain ways I couldn't connect. I felt nervous because there was nervous energy around me. There's several things. So let's say I give myself the number 4. So 0 is like I'm almost dead. 10 is like I'm Jesus Christ. And I was like a 4. Not terrible. I wasn't being abused every night, that kind of thing, but I was struggling as a young person, and I'm talking like 0 to 6 or 7 years old. So if I'm a 4 then, and that becomes my imprint, that imprint becomes how I feel as what's real, my reality, then I take that 4 and I move into the rest of my life, I'm going to attract 4s. Now, after our developmental years, we have a different phase, the adaptive child phase that learns to protect our young self and the wounds and the beliefs that we have about self. That's the period where we might feel defensive or learn how to get what we want, or we might become rebellious, or all kinds of things happen in the phase. And then we grow up and we become whatever we become in our lives. Now, if I'm a 4, that doesn't necessarily mean in my work I'm gonna present as a 4, because I might have figured out a way how to feel successful, more aligned, more purposeful, etcetera. Maybe I'm running at a 6 or a 7 in my work, but when I hook up with a partner, a lover, a best friend, etcetera, I'm gonna feel like a 4, because as we know, that's when our most intimate, vulnerable selves come out eventually, right? And so this is what happens. People find each other and then everything's great at first, like, "Oh, there's a familiarity. I know you. I see you. Like, this is great. We're gonna be besties." And then 6 months, a year down the line is now we start seeing the underbelly. We start seeing the 4. We start pinging each other's 4, and what can appear like the worst of us comes out, or the uncomfortable parts of us come out, or the triggered parts, what have you. And what we're really just seeing is the mirror of the other to us, of that lower frequency vibration. And there's a part of us, because we are spirit and soul, that knows we're so much more than a 4. We want to be happy. We want to feel peace. We want to feel creative and artistic and alive and free. But the physical self and all the experience that we've had's a 4. And that's all I'm getting around me as 4s. So, yeah, and for example, my book, and there's a lot of other techniques out there, but helping a person take micro steps to learn how to start to evolve and expand their energy in slow ways, because we have to learn how to sustain it so that we can eventually become a 5. And that may not seem like enough for a lot of people, but that's part of the problem, is we're stuck in this, it's not enough, it's not enough, I need a fix. This process of healing, it is a journey, and it's slow, and it unfolds like the most beautiful flower in the world. And then we become a 5, and then maybe we become a 5.2, and then maybe a 5.4. And when we can sustain that 5.5 for a period of time, then we start noticing, oh, my world actually looks like a 5.5. I'm attracting different types of people. I'm attracting different job opportunities. I feel differently in my relationships, what have you. So it's a beautiful unfolding if we allow it, but we have to become conscious enough, brave enough to admit to ourselves and often to other people, this isn't about you, this is about me, and I'm just seeing myself in you. And that part that I'm seeing, it's triggering, oh, yeah, I have all this stuff I still need to look at.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, there so many teachers say when we look at somebody else, we're looking in a mirror.
Right.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's a great example of that. Couple more questions for you as we're winding down here. Do you find that these kinds of emotional situations and energetic situations affect people from their health standpoint, affect people physically from disease and illness and that kind of thing? Have you found a correlation there?
Oh, yes, 100%.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of books kind of about this. The first book that I read on it probably 35 years ago or something was John Sarno's About the Back. And it was about support and our different relationships and patterns that we have in our lives that manifest in our back and different parts of our back. Um, I I look at my body like a vehicle, and when my body is talking to me, I know that there is a lot of information there. I try not to look at it like something is happening to me, something is happening with me that is giving me information. So I think there are, what do I want to say? There's collected studies and evidence and information that I think we can all agree on in a certain way. For example, like our heart. There's some philosophies and spiritualities that will say, one without hate in their heart will never have a heart attack. And so they work to clear any kind of resentment or hate or anger in their heart, to avoid that kind of thing. So and we know that stress affects the body for example, again, I'll use a personal example just because I have the information. Most of my issues are around my sacral chakra, around my sacral region, including, as we just mentioned, the rape that was there. I had a hernia in the front of my groin when I was 5 years old. I had a weird, huge cyst on my rear end when I was 18 years old. Um, different things have happened. Now, one might look at that karmically and like look back into the lives and what happened there. You can look at it emotionally, energetically. It's all connected to me. But what I know is there's a lot of information there that, on the one hand, I could say it makes me struggle and suffer and it's bad. On the other hand, I know it's my power source, if we talk about this in Christian terms, it's like the angel and the devil. What are we looking at? And I would say, oh my gosh, I have a devil in my sacrum over the entirety of my life. And on the other hand, like, no, this is the angel in my sacrum, and they're trying to compete because it is my power source, the creativity, the productivity, the intimacy, the seat of the soul. But I've had so many problems there. Even right now through menopause, I have tremendous pain on my low back and my sacrum region. So I'm treating it physically, I'm treating it energetically, and I'm treating it emotionally, meaning right now I'm going through a critical period of a woman's life where I will function differently than I ever did before. And there is an awakening, there's an opening, there is a shift that is happening, and my body is feeling it. And so the less that I resist all of that and come into acceptance of the grief and the beauty and the loss and the changes and so forth, then I'm working with the pain itself. So that's just an example of how I think that all of us can use the information of our bodies as signals, as information. That's it.
I agree. It's been my experience in working with tens of thousands of clients over the years that there's always an emotional component that's present before any kind of medical condition arises. And it, also, it's been my experience, and I'd love to hear your take on this, that our intuition saying, yeah, you may want to look at that. And then it gets alert. You really may want to look at that. And then it's screaming, you really, really, really want to look at that. And then last resort, the body's really getting our attention when we're in pain or something's going on, some kind of illness or disease, and we say, "Okay, what's the emotional component here?" It's always fascinating to see what it is because it can be something, again, my experience, that is seemingly benign to us as adults, like somebody called you a name when you were 3 and it hurts your feelings, but to your 3-year-old little self, that was pretty dramatic. Or it may be something really dramatic and traumatic, and it doesn't really matter what it was
Yeah.
because it's something that's there that I use the term, it's an energy block that then other life events, emotional energy piles, piles, piles on top of it and eventually causes a rupture in the energy-filled membrane, and the body's screaming at us going, "Hey, I've been trying to get you to pay attention to me for a really long time and you haven't." And then once we address it, it it seems to subside and the body can heal itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like that's what you've experienced too. What's a small step that somebody can take right now if they want to move in a healthier direction, both emotionally and physically and spiritually?
Well, I think, like I said earlier, the piece about taking responsibility for oneself. In my podcast recently, I was talking about things that are out and in for next year. And I truly believe that if we can release the victim mentality, that there's so much power there. So releasing the victim. Another thing I would suggest is learning how to really trust and trust in yourself, trust in spirit, and God and others as well. But it starts really with learning to trust ourselves. So, um, I think those are huge they're huge, but they're also the things that we can start with right now and just looking at where I don't trust myself. Where do I play victim?
Mhm. And I think that takes practice too. It's not like you're gonna do it once and then you've just got it,
Right.
would be
Yeah.
my thought. Do you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, it's a lifelong all these things are lifelong.
Yeah, yeah. Too bad. You know, I have the light bulb go off, and then it's just fixed, and then we don't have to do anything else with it. Why do we incarnate? Last question.
I don't know if anyone really knows the answer to that. I think a lot of people have ideas or wants about that. I think the express well, this is it's a complicated answer, I think, for me. If if we hold to the idea that there is no time, that the timeline is an illusion because it's all simultaneous in a certain regard, we can't understand that with our minds and our bodies in this form and dimension. But I think that our soul self has maybe the energy or the desire or the connection to different frequencies to express itself differently and to move through experience in very different, unique ways. Also, bigger than that, though, where it's not personal, if we have all of this energy that we all are, energy has to move and express itself. So the fragments are going to, you know, come alive in some way. So I don't know. I'm really kind of on the fence because I know we make this life so personal about us. But if it's not, let's think about what's possible. If it's not about me and the story that I'm telling about who's Leah Guy, and we're just here in a way, like being refraction of light and love and energy. And maybe we're doing that simultaneously in a different way somewhere, somehow that we can't sense. Maybe there's not a reason for it at all, so I'm on the fence of all of it. I do feel that we are expressions and conduits of sources, love and light. I do feel that. And we will never not be that. How many times that happens and why that happens and so forth, I'm not 100% sure, but I don't think it's as uniquely personal as we wanna make it, I think we should celebrate that, not ourselves in that way. I'm just a piece of that. I'm not yeah, so, that may not be a great answer, but
No, I think it's really a thought-provoking answer, though, because it's my belief, based on talking with bazillions of spirits over the years, that we get too stuck in the weeds and we miss the big picture, and we are actors playing a role in a movie or a Broadway play or whatever. And every time we experience something, that's what it's about. What I've heard so many times is there's no right or wrong in heaven. It's just an experience. And when somebody's going through something horrific, the spirits and beyond are going, cool. How's she going to get out of this? What's she going to create? What's going on next? And that's so hard for us to even begin to grasp from our human perspective. But I've heard it so many times that I just go to the place of, is it feasible? Yeah. Well, I understand it more when I get back to heaven. Yeah. And then let it go. And I think that's a big thing, is not to get stuck in the weeds and overanalyze the daylights out of everything, like what you were alluding to
yeah.
earlier.
I always say I can't wait until I die and just able to look at it all and the tapestry, that's been woven. I can't wait. I mean, I can kind of sense it now when I'm doing readings with people. It makes me so emotional because it's so beautiful and just like awe-inspiring, but I can't wait to see the whole thing.
Well, and then you'll reincarnate and you'll forget it all again. And I love this saying, "Yeah, it's gonna be really interesting and really beautiful when we die, just not today."
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
I think you're a remarkable woman. What
Oh,
you've been able to put together between your traumatic experiences in your life and then parlay that into the energetic side of the equation and then helping people dissect that and heal themselves. I think what you're doing is really remarkable. So kudos for you and congratulations on having the courage to do this because I know as well as you know that to put ourselves out there doing this kind of thing is at least initially it's frightening and we think, "Oh my gosh, everybody's going to think we're nuts," but we're still led and we follow where we're led. So, congratulations to you on that.
Oh, thank you,
I
Julie.
think you're doing wonderful things for the world, which is why I wanted to have you on the show to let everybody else know about you. Speaking of that, how can people get in touch with you and learn more about you and your work?
My website is leahguy.com. It's LEAHGUY.com. And social media is at Leah the Modern Sage.
Okay, terrific. And so we'll have that in the show notes. People will be able to get that information too. All righty, everybody, that's it for today. Sending you lots of love from Sweet Home, Alabama, mwah! And from New Jersey too, where Leah is. We'll see you next time. To enhance your spiritual journey, click on one of the videos below and remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share with your family and friends.